Hello everyone, welcome to Learn English with Mir. This is lecture number 3 based on root words. Before I proceed ahead, I hope that you have revised and you do have watched lecture number 1 on root word and lecture number 2 on root words, right? So in today's class, I've selected the root word Saul or Soli. Now Saul and Soli means alone or lonely. So let's explore words that have this root, Saul or Soli. So for all those who have missed the previous lesson, let me recap a little bit by saying that like human families and roots of families, words have roots, and based on the roots there are families of words. So let's get started with family of words having the root word Saul or Soli, which means alone or lonely. So the first word I have selected is Saul. The part of speech for this word is adjective, and it means single or only. Example number 1, Qurban is my sole friend. Now this means that I have only one friend and he is Qurban, right? Example number 2, Irfan is the sole surviving member of the family who met a tragic accident. So it means that there were so many people in the family, all of them have died, but the only person who survived is Irfan. So Saul means one and means single. Okay, so moving ahead, solitary. It is adjective and more or less it means lone, lonely, or being abandoned, right? So alone without other. So it means that you are in solitary. Okay, example number 1. In zoo, animals live alone, not in colonies or in social groups, whereas in the wild you will find animals living in groups, in social groups, or in colonies. So when animals are kept in the zoo, you will feel that they are in solitary, they have separate cells for them. So second example, solitary confinement. Now confinement means that to be in a particular place, all right? So solitary confinement, this phrase is used and it means that a punishment in which a prisoner is kept alone in a separate cell. What is solitary confinement? It's a punishment given to a person by keeping him alone in a separate cell. So by the way, solitary has negative connotation, all right? So it's used in the negative sense, not in the positive sense. Moving ahead, solitude. More or less, solitary and solitude have the same meaning, the state of being alone, especially when you find this pleasant, right? Now, there is a little difference between solitary and solitude, whereas solitude is positive. It has positive connotation, it has positive meaning, all right? And this has negative meaning, right? So here in solitude, it is the state of being alone, but the person enjoys it, right? So sometimes we love moving away from other people's, and we love to be solitude, right? So I guess there are different poetries in English where poets are talking about their solitude, right? That they were, and especially the romantic poets, when they were moving away from the town, from the city towards the valleys, all right, in search of solitude. Okay, moving ahead, soliloquy, repeating the pronunciation again, soliloquy. Now, for many of you, it might be a new vocab, all right? So now soliloquy has connection with the plays, all right? So if you have a background in English literature, you have studied plays or dramas, so you could know about what is soliloquy. By the way, let's look at the meaning or the definition, what it means. One who is alone and speaks to himself or oneself is called to be soliloquy, right? Now, what happens in a play or in a drama, as I suggested, it's a word that comes from plays and dramas. So on the stage, when a character speaks to himself, all right, and when he's alone and he's speaking to himself, is called to be soliloquy, and especially it's used in plays and dramas, right? And relatedly, you might have heard of monologue. So monologue is when one person speaks and rest of them are silent or deliberately silent, right? Whereas dialogue, it's a conversation between two or more people. So dialogue, where more people speak, monologue, when one person speaks, right? And then soliloquy, when a single person is talking to himself, and particularly in the context of a stage, right? Okay, so moving ahead, the fifth word I have is console. Now again, we find the root word here, sol. So it's a verb. What it means? To show sympathy to somebody who is unhappy, disappointed, lonely, or sad. So if you are consoling someone, it means that someone is disappointed, he has moved away from rest of the group members, rest of the people, rest of the family members. So when you console him, you're showing your sympathy, right? For example, nothing could console him when his wife died, right? Okay, so he was finding himself alone. And then the sixth word, desolate. So again, we have the root word Saul here. It's an adjective, so it's used to refer to a lone place. Now it could be used with person as well. For example, a place which is not populated, okay, it's very lone, deserted, isolated, is called to be desolate place. Okay, now in our context, in context of Gilgit-Baltistan, there are several valleys, there are several areas which we could refer as desolate place. Okay, and then the seventh word, solo. So done by one person alone, not by a group, by a single person, right? For example, a solo flight, okay, a solo artist, a solo traveler means a person who travels alone, single, okay, not in group. And then the last word I'm having is isolate. It's a verb, so we have the root word Saul here. Now what it means, to separate a person or place from others, right? So now these days we are talking about the COVID-19, the coronavirus, and we have been repeatedly using the word self-isolate or self-isolation. So when you are isolating yourself, when you are in isolation, what happens that you are alone, okay? You are not with group. So somehow it's talking about, or it's giving the meaning, alone or lonely. So in self-isolate, you are alone, not in groups. And then you might have heard of isolation ward, where the patient is alone, not in form of groups. Okay, so repeating back, in today's lesson we have talked about the root word Saul, all right, or Soli, which means alone or lonely. Okay, so the first word, we have got the root word Saul, means single or alone, and we talked about a friend who is Saul friend. Okay, and then we talked about, here in this word we have talked about solitary. Okay, we have the root word Saul. Again, it talks about being alone or lonely. Being abandoned means that when people leave you and you're alone socially. Okay, so it is solitary, and it has a negative connotation. Then we talked about solitude, and I told you that it has positive connotation, right? So it's also the state of being alone, but sometimes we are alone, but even we enjoy it. So when you are feeling it pleasant to be alone, so that is solitude. And then I talked about soliloquy. So again, we have the root word Soli here. So it comes from plays and dramas, and it talks about a person who is on the stage and talking to himself. Console, so we have the root word Saul, showing sympathy to someone who is alone due to any reason, whether unhappy, disappointed, lonely, sad, or due to any other reason. Okay, and then desolate place, deserted place, or a place which is lone place. Okay, there is no population around. And then solo, done by one, solo dancer, solo fight, solo artist, solo traveler, and so. And the last word, isolate, we have got the root word Saul, which means to be separated. When you are separated, it means that you are alone. So self-isolate and isolation ward, these are example of the root word isolate. I hope today's lesson might have been beneficial for you. Okay, let me repeat that. Keep on watching and don't forget to subscribe, and I will be coming up with wonderful lessons further. Bye bye. Thank you.